welcome to Have a Chat. I am your host today, Veronique Arsenault, and I am joined by my ever stunningly beautiful co-host, Audrey Lynch.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Veronique.
Hi, Audrey. And Judy couldn't be with us today. She did have something else that she had to do, but we'll look forward to seeing her next week. And it is my first week back.
Yes. Welcome back, sweetie.
Thanks. It was, it was different to be off for the last 6 or so weeks. And I think for those of you who live in Miramichi, you probably know why. I had decided to run for city council here in Miramichi and was successful, which is
Yes,
exciting.
you were.
I will be a city councilor as of sometime next week. But anyway, we'll talk about that after in a little bit. But I'm so glad to be back and so glad to be back with you, Audrey, and looking forward to having Judy back with us next week. But let's kick today off with your quote. I love it, and I want you to share with everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to pick a quote that had to do with our wonderful guests. I just want to mention to our viewers, you're not going to want to miss this show. It's definitely informative, very interesting guests, and lots of information. So my quote had to do with that. So it starts off, gardening is about enjoying the smell of the things growing in the soil, getting dirty without feeling guilty, and generally taking the time to soak up a little peace and serenity. So that's my quote for today.
Love it, love it. And I am not a gardener. I don't want to say I have a black thumb, but I don't have a green one for sure. I'm not so good with making things grow, but I love the beauty and the artistry of gardening and seeing fields of whatever it may be. So I love that quote, Audrey. It was great.
Yeah. Well, when my kids were very little and I had lived back in Napan, and I was a stay-at-home mom, I had actually got my husband to till up a corner of our land. We had a big piece of land, and there was a field that I always wanted to keep mowed so that the kids had lots of space to run around. And I got him to till a corner of it, and I actually grew tomatoes, corn, potatoes, and string beans back then. So I did have a little bit of a green thumb back then. I'm not sure. I don't think I yielded this huge crop by any means, but and then life gets busy and the kids get busy. And so now last year, pandemic, I was back at it and I'm really enjoying it. And this quote for me really spoke to, I think, it makes me feel like that peace, that serenity. It brings that calm to be outdoors and, getting my hands dirty.
Awesome. Yeah. I can understand where that serenity comes from. And two, it's that sense of accomplishment when you look at, something that you've planted and is growing, and of course all of our food comes originally, from farms, right? And from growth. So yeah, I can understand how that would be an amazingly peaceful feeling. It like I said, I'm not good at it, so it's not something I do often, but can understand why people do.
Yeah, well, it's connecting to nature on a certain level, on a closer level. Being stuck indoors all winter long, like I couldn't wait to have the sun on my skin and my toes in the grass and just connect and like that nurture nature bond. I think is a real thing for me anyway, and I feel like I get a lot of benefits from it for sure. One of the things I wanted to chat with you, yeah, about is some amazing places in New Brunswick, because doing the gardening thing and things like that here in New Brunswick, it is tricky because there's only certain things that can grow and do well. But did you know that the amazing places in New Brunswick, because we all used to travel quite a bit before COVID, but now we're staying a little closer to home. And I wanted to share that I had noticed on Facebook today, I believe it was one of the radio stations that had shared the post on a place outside of Florenceville, New Brunswick. And there is actually a replica of Noah's Ark built there. and
Wow.
it's yeah, it's a tourist. It's actually two-thirds the size of the Ark in the Bible, so almost uh, to scale. It currently used as a dormitory for the School of the Spirit. It was built by a local pastor in 1993. So I'm
Wow.
actually quite excited. I've never known that that has been there. Um, it would okay. I had to 27 years ago, 27, maybe 28
Yeah.
years ago that it's been
Yeah.
there, and I never ever knew that. And it's fantastic. I can't wait to go see it. You can actually see an arc. There's the Netherlands, Hong Kong, and Williamstown, Kentucky has someone built one there as well. So it's I think it's a
Cool.
sight to see. I think everybody should go see it.
Yeah, I actually didn't know it existed either. So that's how interesting. I just can't even imagine what that actually looks like and the time that it must have taken to build it.
Hmm. Exactly. I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I'm hoping actually to explore a whole lot more of New Brunswick this summer and even just to get up to Sheep House Falls. I keep saying this is probably the
Hmm.
third year that I've said that I want to go see, and I haven't done it yet. So I'm really hoping that
Oh,
this is the year. Yeah, this is the year.
right.
That's my goal, my plan. But there's so many different, unique, wonderful things to explore in New Brunswick, and we just don't, we don't talk about them enough, I think.
No, and there's the new incentive is back. The incentive for being reimbursed for traveling within your province for a mini vacation or for however long. There's I believe they're reimbursing 20% back of your vacation. So that's an incentive to get out and travel around and see what your province has to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. So we'll talk a little bit about since the last show, the municipal elections happened here in New Brunswick, and so
That's
um,
right.
yeah, it was definitely
Yay!
different. Yeah, it was. Election day was May 10th, and then the results weren't shared across the province until May 25th. Because Edmundston and Madawaska, I believe, had to still, go through their voting process. And so the results were shared on May 25th, which was last Tuesday. And
So the
I did
delay,
manage to be. Mhm.
explain why there was a delay. There was a lot of people that didn't seem to understand why.
Yeah. Yeah. So with elections in New Brunswick, if you let's
Okay.
say one of your kids is going to school in Fredericton at the University of New Brunswick, but their residence
Okay.
is still here in Miramichi, they can vote in Fredericton for a candidate in Miramichi. So that was the
Ah,
same
okay.
theory, right, around the results
Okay.
coming out all at the same time. So if somebody was either living in Edmundston and their residence was typically here, but they were going to school or whatever it may be in Edmundston or Madawaska, um, they had to have the same opportunity as everybody else in the province to vote. And had they released the results from Miramichi before everybody had the opportunity to vote, it could have changed the results, right? So in this
Okay.
particular case, like because you could have been influenced, or maybe you were going to vote for somebody
Oh, by
else
hearing
but
the numbers.
didn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, and so I know it was frustrating for a lot of people, and it
Okay.
was hard on the candidates for sure, because of course everybody was, excited and waiting and put a lot of energy and work into their campaigns. So but they did trying to work through a pandemic. The Elections New Brunswick did the very best
Mm,
that they could to
yeah.
ensure, as much transparency and equity across the province as possible. So they did release the results as a whole on May 25th at 8 p.m. So the polls closed at 8 p.m. in Edmundston and Madawaska. And then they released the results it was probably around 20 after 8 when we finally got the results on the website. It was a little nerve wracking, I will admit.
Yes. Oh my goodness,
Because
for
I
sure.
mean, after weeks and weeks and weeks of you know, just trying to connect with people the best you could in a pandemic, you really just want to,
Mm,
know if you were going to get to work or get, get on with moving on and doing the, something else to give back to your community. So here in Miramichi, we had our mayor Adam Lorden was acclaimed, so nobody ran against him before the close of the
Right.
nomination period. So he actually didn't have
Right.
to run a campaign. So we wanted to
Right.
congratulate Mayor Lorden for sure. And then for council, there was 8 seats available, and so there are four incumbents, meaning that they had been on council in the previous council.
That's
And
right.
I have to
Yeah.
say this about the previous council. Those 8 people sat on council for 5 years, which is a year longer than would normally be a
Right.
mandate, and did a wonderful job. They did a lot of hard work, and I can't thank them enough really for everything that they did over those 5 years, and left the city in a shape that we as the new council can move forward with, and continue on with the great work that they started. So I really want to thank the previous council as a whole, and congratulate all of the candidates. We had 15 candidates for 8 spots,
That's
and
right. I don't remember it being
yeah,
that large in a long time. And kudos
no,
to even putting your name in the hat, really, because it's a
absolutely.
lot.
Absolutely. And the candidates that ran this time, and we always have wonderful candidates that run for city council, so we're lucky in that way. But the candidates that ran this time, I really have to say, were people that are so engaged in their community and in this community that we
Mm,
live in Miramichi. So it was, really a powerhouse field this time, and it was amazing to see the camaraderie between the candidates, and the teamwork already, and see what their vision was for Miramichi going forward. So there was 8 of us that were successful. 4 of them were previously on the previous council. So Tara Ross Robinson, Ryan Summers, Chad Duplessis, and Brian King are all returning to
mhm.
council. And then brand new this time, there's Patty Quinn, myself, Sam Johnston, and Jason Harris. Although Jason Harris was on council in 2012, he is coming back to council after a brief
Okay.
hiatus, we'll call it. So there's 8 brand
Yes.
new councilors that start next week.
Congratulations, Veronique. I don't
Thanks,
doubt for a
thanks.
minute that you're going to give it 100% of your heart and soul, like you do everything else in your life and in your community. And I wish you the best. And I can't wait to see how you're going to shake things up.
Thank you. I'm really excited to work with the team that the city put together and the voters put together, and
Mhm.
see what we can do next. And there's 2 more congratulations I want to send out, and that's to the Regional Health Authority board members that were
Yes.
elected.
Yes.
So Peggy
Hmm.
Doyle was elected to one part of the Regional Health Authority because it kind of splits up in the city. And then
Hmm.
Derek Hutchison was elected to the other portion. So, again, that was an incredible thing to watch. And I just want to comment on Derek's election. Derek Hutchison and Mike McCombs were the 2 candidates that ran there, and Derek won by 1 vote.
Vote. I know.
One,
I seen
one
that.
vote.
Super, 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 super close. I'm sure they
Yeah.
double checked and rechecked and triple checked and you know, definitely
Well, and
that's
it,
when you say one vote, like,
yep.
does my vote count? Does it even matter? Does my vote even matter? Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Just
and
ask
he is
Derek.
absolute proof that
Yeah.
that every vote matters. And Mr. McCombs could have asked for a recount. He
Hmm.
decided not to, and was very supportive of Derek Hutchison's election. And so,
Okay.
class act on both their parts, and really exciting to see
Nice.
what's going to happen there as well.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Congratulations to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just we want to talk, just as we close out this segment and head into our guests. We want to talk about something very sad, very disturbing, and a horrifying discovery that was made last week. The 215 Indigenous children that were discovered in
Mm.
buried near one of the residential schools in BC. We're
Mhm.
both wearing our orange shirts today, in
Yeah.
memory and in recognition of the survivors of the residential school system, but also those babies and children that were lost
Exactly.
to our country and to their own communities and their families. And it's hard to put into words, the sadness that we feel, and and how sorry we are.
Yes, definitely. Horrific thing to realize that you know as Canadians, as a human race, that we are capable of even you know executing such horrific kind of conditions, and inflict that kind of torture and pain on another human being, and children at that, is just beyond my ability even fathom. um that happened in my very own country. It seems like these are things that we hear of that happens in other places. It's not us, but unfortunately it is, and it does happen. And thoughts and prayers with everyone who is touched by this recent discovery. And just that I'm lost for words in knowing what to say altogether.
Absolutely, absolutely, and to our Indigenous neighbors and friends and loved ones,
Mm,
we cannot walk in your shoes, but please know that you will no longer walk alone.
definitely, definitely. Well said.
So as we head into break, we have two great guests coming up. So please don't go too far, and we look forward to what's to come. So go grab a good beverage. We'll grab a cool one in this time, and then come on back, and we'll talk to our guests. See you soon, everybody. Hi, and welcome back to Have a Chat. I am your host today, Veronique Arsenault, and I am joined by my ever wonderful co-host, Audrey Lynch.
Mm. Hello.
Hey, it's so good to be back on the show and here with our wonderful guests. We're about to have two fantastic guests join us over the next little bit, and our very first guest today is Sean Rollo, joining us from Orkin, Canada, and he is a technical director here in New Brunswick, based out of Moncton. So we're so glad to have you, Sean. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Yes, thank you for joining us today.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for having me.
Now, Sean, tell us and the viewers a little bit about you so that we can get to know you, and then we'll dive right into some of those great questions that we have.
Sure. As you said, my name is Sean Rollo. I'm the technical director for Orkin Canada. We're Canada's largest pest control company and operate from coast to coast. I've been employed here for 18 years, so seen a lot of things from all different types of pests, and happy to talk about them with you today.
Wonderful.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yes, 18 years. That's a lot of experience with pests for sure. We're going to dive right in, like Veronique said, and we're going to start off with one of my least favorite that I'm plagued with here in my home, that I find outside. And we're going to touch on our first little subject about the wasps and bees. Now, can you give us a handle on how to avoid having that, or what would we do as far as taking steps to what Orkin would do to help us get rid of them?
Sure. So they don't necessarily have to be annoying. As you said, yes, they're definitely something we're going to experience outside when we're around our garden and enjoying our back deck. Wasps tend to be a lot more aggressive than, say, honeybees would. And I think in the later segment, when we're talking with Gwen about gardening, we're going to see how important bees are as pollinators. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
important when we're looking at how do we go about treating or mitigating a pest, we have to look at, well, what are the potential benefits of having that around? Not everything is a pest. So when it comes to honeybees, we actually don't treat for those. We would involve a beekeeper to either come out to try to relocate the hive itself, or see if there's some measures we can
Okay.
do to not destroy the hive, or educate the public on why they're important, and that they're actually quite friendly and docile. A lot of people will see it flying around and they immediately panic thinking they're going to get stung, but bees are very unlikely to sting somebody, and they're quite nice to have around for all of the benefits that we just talked about. When it comes to wasps, they can be a little bit more aggressive, especially if the nest is nearby And that's something that,
Mm.
we might be able to come out and take care of. We could do a treatment for it or remove the nest itself. They're particularly active around barbecue season. They're attracted to the smells that come off of our barbecue. And so having the barbecue a little further away from where you might be dining can help out. Having fake wasp nests sometimes can help, because they don't tend to want to build a nest close to where there's already an existing nest, as a deterrent. Not always effective, but it's a tool in the toolbox. And then if all else fails, of course, you can call Orkin Canada to come out and take care of the nest itself, where we can treat it and then remove it for you.
Wow.
Okay. Is
Wow.
there any issue specifically? Yeah. With
No,
the
go ahead.
wasp, that I'm just going to make note that it seems like every year I go around my house to see where they're setting up shop, because it's somewhere right up against my home. And I'm just wondering, what is
Mhm.
it that I can do to deter them? Because I do live in quite a wooded area, lots of trees, but why the house?
Yeah, so there's not really a lot you can do to deter them, other than perhaps some of the fake wasp nests that are out there to help try to prevent them from nesting in that area. But not all species are affected by that. Some species of wasps don't care about that, and they're more apt to make it, even if there was one there. So there's not a lot you can do in that regard. They're attracted to areas where they can get ready source for developing the nest. So one of the more common wasps that are out there is a paper wasp, and it needs wood or paper fibers to make the nest with. So it's actually scratching with its mouth parts to pull pieces off. It mixes it with its saliva, and then it starts to build those paper nests, which is quite incredible when you think about how it's all done. Why are they making it in the area they do? Proximity to food sources. Maybe there's another nest that's not too far away, so it's competing source, so it pushes it off to a different area. And then there's just all the things that make it attractive, an area that's protected. So it's outside of all the rain and elements. It's not got direct sun beating on it. Our house offers a lot of these types of things that make it attractive to the wasps. There's not a lot of predators nearby, so on and so forth. There'll still be nests out in your forested area in behind your yard that you talked about, but there's some
Mhm.
prime real estate right close to your house as well.
Yes, there is.
Amazing. Um, I have a couple questions involving that. So, this year there was such a movement around no mow May, and
Yes.
letting those dandelions grow. And I think no mow May became a real point of adult peer pressure because some of my neighbors
Yes.
had mowed their lawns, and then I felt terrible not having my lawn mowed. But then, of course, I wanted to save the little bees. Um, but when it comes to wasps, is it true that if they have built a nest around your house this year, that they won't return to that nest next year?
Oh, so great question. They typically won't reuse the same nest. It's not every species that applies to. There's lots of different species of wasps and bees that are out there, so you can't have a blanket statement. But by and large, no, they will build a new nest. Um, and so, yeah, leaving the old one up is actually a nice deterrent, because again, when they see that there's already a nest in that spot, they feel that there's some potential competition or even a fight that might take place. So that's
Mhm.
not the best spot. It's easier to find somewhere else to have that nest. So
Oh,
this whole
great.
moment,
Okay.
the no mow May that you brought up is an interesting subject. I think um, not a lot of science behind whether or not that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. From the dandelion standpoint, yes, having that around would certainly have a bit more pollen available for pollinators. But when you think about the urban settings that we're in, there's typically a lot of available pollen around in the different trees and shrubs and flowers and things that we have, regardless. I'm not sure that the no mow May actually has as great of an effect as people might think that it would. And I'm not sure the potential negative side effects of a no mow May were thought of. One of the things that really concerns me is that we've allowed these weeds to grow to the point where they've seeded, and now we've got potentially more that are
Mm,
coming. And then you get the people that obsess over their lawns. So they bought into the no mow May, they did it, but now they're going to be fighting for the next several months to try to get their lawn to the point where they want it to be. And will that result
right.
perhaps in more herbicides and
Mm.
products and chemicals sprayed on lawns to try to kill these weeds that have now had a
Okay.
foothold take place. That concerns me, because that may ultimately be worse than had we not done anything at all. The other thing that concerns me is
Okay.
that when we allow our grass to grow that long, we're providing a lot of habitat for baby birds to nest, baby animals nesting in,
Oh,
and then we go with the
snakes.
lawnmower. And now potentially we don't see them, and of course that's a bad scenario. Or we do see them, and what
Yes.
do? Now you need to leave them there until they've weaned and they're out of that nest. So um, a really I think a positive thing at the start. I think the momentum behind it was wonderful to see, and from a pollinator standpoint it might have a really net benefit effect. But there's also other things to think about, and so I'm not sure, when this is all said and done, was it really a positive, or was it was there nothing that came out of it, or was it negative? I'm not sure we'll know
Interesting.
for some time.
Yeah,
Interesting.
exactly.
Wow.
It will take a little bit.
Um, so the other thing that, everybody just despises at this time of the year is, of course, we get the nice weather and then the mosquitoes come out and then the ticks come out.
Mm,
And I've got little fluffy fur friends, and every day now I'm checking, the paws, the ears, everything for those ticks. What do we do about those mosquitoes and those ticks?
Right. So I think mosquitoes and ticks are going to be particularly bad this year, as are a lot of pests. We had a very somewhat mild and long winter that just leads for them to be able to survive. So we got greater survival rates over winter. We had a fairly mild spring coming in, followed then by a bunch of cold. So we're not positive if it's going to have a bit of a kill off, because the spring itself, we had a lot of dips below zero that weren't normal for this time of year. My own experience in my backyard, I'm seeing mosquitoes being pretty prolific already, which
mm,
leads me to believe it's going to be a particularly bad season for that. From a mosquito standpoint, there are options that you can call a company like Rick in Canada. We can come out and do a treatment plan. One of the best things to do is walk your property and look for standing water, and it doesn't have to be a lot of
mm.
water. A little bottle cap full of water that sits there for an extended period of time can be a breeding site for mosquitoes. Some of the key things to look for around a property would be like a bird bath, for example. If you've got an artificial pond, maybe around the edges, if it's not moving, you could put in bubbles or aerators that would help move the water around. Old tires on a property, spots under decks. If the soil or gravel underneath the deck has become depressed from water dripping,
Right.
re-backfilling that, getting it level. Trying to get rid of these water sources is huge. That's where mosquitoes are breeding. So that's the first step. And then just looking around for, can we trim back some vegetation in certain areas? Are there certain plants that they might be more apt to rest on? And maybe Gwen might be touching on this in the next segment as well. These are all things
Hmm.
we can do to help mitigate mosquitoes. You're not going to eliminate them completely from your property. And that's where we can come in as a company and take that next step to alleviate the problem.
Hey, everybody's telling me to go run out and buy, and they swear by the new gadget, Thermacell, I think it's called,
Right.
for the mosquitoes. Gives you this nice big bubble. Has to do with little propane cartridges and a little felt piece that goes in it. And I was wondering if that's like, do they work?
Um, I've not had a lot of experience with them, to be honest. I did just
Okay.
purchase one just for my own self-interest. I mean, I'm a technical director. This is what I do. I look at products and experiment with them to see how they work.
Hmm.
Um, I had one out the other night. It seemed to have some effect. What we have to remember is that it's not actually solving the problem. So
True.
unless we're carrying one of those around with us all over our property when we're
True.
cutting the grass, or if we want to go,
Yeah.
have a fire around the fire, or by the, wherever the picnic area is, or whatever it is that we're doing, we have to have that with us all the time. Um,
True.
I'm I'm always mindful of those things too, because they are chemical based. And
Okay.
yes, Health Canada does a wonderful job evaluating the products before they allow them to be used for public use. And they always err on the side of caution. They look at worst case scenarios. If somebody was sitting around this all day long, every day, what would that affect?
Mm.
So
Hmm.
I'm fairly confident that they're safe, but I always am concerned about that it's emitting chemical all the time. And so, there may be a better long-term solution rather than something that needs to be used all the time.
Exactly. So we'll move
And
on to our
so,
ticks.
yeah, so to go back to ticks, I think in the same light as mosquitoes and some of the other insects that had a relatively easier time of winter, they were overwintering a little bit better and surviving better. We're going to see, I think, an increase in ticks. And in fact, the last few seasons, we've seen a continual increase in the amount of ticks that we're seeing. I guess the message I'd get out there, number one, please don't panic. There is a lot of media around Lyme disease and so on. Lyme disease is still relatively rare, and I'm not downplaying it. It's still very real, but it's relatively rare. There's only one type of tick that we would see that would have Lyme disease. And even if you did get bit with it, it doesn't mean you're going to get Lyme disease. One thing you do want to always, when you're out in the woods going for a hike or in areas of long grass or shrubs where you think ticks might be prevalent, always do a tick check when you get back. Look for ticks around the ankles, look around your sleeves, your armpits, your groin, because if you do have a tick on you, you want to have it removed as quickly as possible. So definitely do that. Your pets, same thing. If you're gone for a walk with your dog, or if you've got a cat that goes out in the yard, check them for ticks periodically too. And of course, veterinarians can prescribe medication that would not allow ticks to stay on the animals. Something I definitely recommend if you're, got a backyard with a lot of forest behind it or a ravine. You're not going to typically find ticks in a typical urban backyard where it's literally just your lawn and a few shrubs. It's usually if you back onto a forest or somewhere else. Ticks are often associated with deer, moose, smaller animals as well that are in these forested areas. So if you don't have that, your chances of ticks are pretty small. So your typical backyard would not necessarily be a risk for ticks. But we can do treatments for that. In fact, there's a really neat product that's just come on the market. Oddly enough, manufactured by the same company that you had mentioned with these Thermacell mosquito devices. They've come up with what they're calling a tick tube. And essentially it's a cardboard tube stuffed with cotton that's impregnated with a product that would cause ticks to fall off of mice and rats. So mice and rats are one of the vectors of juvenile ticks, so tick eggs and tick larvae. The adults are typically on larger animals like deer and moose and so on, but the eggs and larvae get on these smaller rodents. Well, the rodents take this cotton material back to their nest to help insulate or make the nest itself. So when they're in the nest, if they had ticks on them, it will kill those ticks. So it's actually helping to break that cycle. And so in a residential setting, they're a wonderful tool. And in fact, they've been used in commercial settings as well. So when you put these out, it's a relatively non-toxic approach to dealing with ticks.
Amazing.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yes, so much information. Definitely.
Yeah. So, Sean, just as we close out the segment, because we're just about done this segment and we're going to have you back because there's so much information. But just as we close out this segment, what's the number one thing that you want people to know and how do we get a hold of you?
So I think probably the best thing is that there are some pests that people feel comfortable in a do-it-yourself approach, and we don't discourage that. If you're capable and you can do it, wonderful. But keep in mind that when you're taking those approaches, often people can exacerbate the problem. So they spray products and it's done incorrectly, and it actually causes the pest to spread. Ants are a primary example of that. People try to get rid of ants, and in doing so, they fracture or spread colonies, and then the problem becomes so much worse, and it's much harder to alleviate at that point. In most cases with pests, it's best to leave it to the experts. Call a professional company like Orkin Canada, come out, do an assessment, and not only are we going to take care of the pest itself, we're going to help to educate the customer on what caused the pest in the first place and what are some things they can do to help prevent it in the future. So as part of that whole approach is the education piece and the preventative piece, not just the how do we get rid of it piece.
Great. And how do we get a hold of you?
So you can reach us on our website. You can go to www.orkincanada.ca, or you can go to our toll-free number, which is 1-800-800-6754. Or you can go on Google, look up your local office. Like I said, we've got offices from coast to coast. Give us a call, and we've got people that can help walk you through your pest issue or your unique situation. And that's something to consider as well, as every single one of these is unique in how it came about, and it's unique in how we're going to solve it.
Wonderful. Well, we want to say a huge thank you to you, Sean Rollo, from the technical director for Orkin Canada. And don't go too far, everybody. We're going to grab a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thanks very much.
Hi, and welcome back to Have a Chat. I am your host today, Veronique Arsenault, and joined by my ever wonderful co-host, Audrey Lynch today.
Hello, Vero.
We are missing Judy, of course, but she had other things that she had to take care of today. But we are joined by a most wonderful guest. Gwen Geeky is joining us from the Miramichi Gardening Club. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We're so glad
Thanks
to
for
have you
joining us.
today. And yeah, and just so that everybody can get to know you and learn all about you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an avid gardener. I've been a gardener for more years than I'd like to think about. And really, I work full time. So if you don't find me at my office where I work, then you'd find me in my garden, or this time of the year in some greenhouses, scouting out what's new and what's a little different. I've been a member of the Garden Club since its inception in 2002. And, as we go on, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Garden Club. Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely.
So,
that's going to be our very next question, is to tell us the history of the Garden Club and the Facebook page that you have, which is how I was able to find you, getting lots of great information. Sort of wish I had found it last year when I was when we were all stuck home, which I'm pretty sure was one of the main reasons that you guys have seen a huge influx of members with the gardening club.
Yeah.
But give us a little history on it first.
Okay, so the Garden Club started in a cold January night. We had 3 people who just sort of got together and said, "Hey, I wonder if there'd be any interest for a gardening group." So that was Arch Pafford and Lynn White and Cool. So they put an ad in the paper and let's see if there's any interest. So on that night, 30 people showed up, and they were so enthusiastic they wanted to meet every 2 weeks.
Wow.
So eventually that all got started up, and it was great. So that club and that process has been going on now. It'll be 20 years in January, and we're still meeting faithfully. We meet the second Thursday of every month in the Nordine Rec Center, and we just do terrific things. And I have met so many wonderful people through that process. We're busy doing all kinds of things. We do major fundraisers, which is plant sales. In the last few years, we've taken those plant sales public to the local farmers markets. COVID, of course, has kept us from doing that last year and this year, but we're hoping with next year that we'll be able to do that as well. And we do all kinds of fun things: road trips, overnight trips, garden tours, crafts, just whatever you could imagine. When you're thinking about gardening, we have all kinds of great speakers come in, and we've had all kinds of like your speaker that you have tonight, plant pruning. We've had orchids, we've had herbs, we've had speakers that come in to tell us how to do your lawn, how to do your landscaping. I guess you name it, and we've done it, and we'd love to have more members. If you hear anything that you're interested in, we'd certainly love to have you come and join us. And the membership is really minimal. It's only $10 for a year. or $15 for a couple, and you get onto our mailing list, and you'll hear all the great things going on. We also have our Facebook page that you had mentioned, Audrey. And right now, that Facebook page is really taking off, I think, because of COVID. We get all kinds of membership requests and all kinds of questions. And there's lots of knowledgeable members who can answer those questions. So, yeah, we've been a pretty busy group, I would say.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Sorry.
So I have no skills whatsoever when it comes to gardening. I will admit to. I do well to get the lawn mowed and to pull what I think are weeds out of my flower beds. But
Right.
talk to us a little bit. Talk to us a little bit. So I find it fascinating, actually, and I'm quite jealous when people do have that skill. But talk to us a little bit about the community outreach that your group does, and if there's any education for the people like me who have no skill.
Well, one great way to get that education is to come to the meetings. Even sometimes with our meetings, we just do a question and answer time. But some of the outreach projects that you're wondering about, we've done a lot of great things. We've worked within the hospital gardens in the past, and we've provided them with a garden shed and a swing that is made for people in a wheelchair. We've done a grow tower initiative with the Croft Elementary, where the kids can actually plant seeds and see them grow within their school year, so that they know where their food comes from. We've done some initiatives with the hospice. We had done some of their gardens when they started out at the very start. We've donated to the food bank. We've actually donated to the Stan Cassidy Gardens there. And we also have the Lending Library Initiative, which we partnered with the Newcastle Library. And right now they're able to offer you all kinds of tools. So if you're a new gardener and you don't know, if you're really going to like to do it and do you want to go out and buy those tools, you can go down and lend or borrow some of those tools and give it a try. So those are just some of the initiatives that we've done in the past. Yeah.
See, there you go, Veronique. She can get you all set up and get started, and it won't cost you anything to buy the tools. I wish I had known about that last year.
Yeah, well, it really just is getting up and running. And there's also other types of tools you can get there too. But if you call the library, they'll give you all kinds of information on what that's all about.
So tell us a little bit more about, now you say this has started back in 2002, which is quite a while. Now, what did you notice last year when the pandemic hit us and everybody was locked in at home? And I'm one of those people who was like, you know what? I was going to get outside. I couldn't go too far. I did have a flower bed that was at this house where I bought 17 years ago. Never looked at it. The couple of times I attempted to do anything, it looked like it was a very, very daunting task. But this time I bought a few tools and some plants and started digging out there. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I was enjoying myself.
When COVID hit was just unbelievable, both in planting bedding plants and in vegetable gardening. It just seemed like, okay, we're home now. We're going to try to do this. And it's been a family affair as well, so kids are getting out, learning where their vegetables are coming from, and they're having fun. Raised garden beds, for instance, they just took right off. Almost every backyard has them right now. And there was a lot of interest, a lot of questions on our Facebook page. There's also a New Brunswick gardening page, which is really quite interesting as well. So people ask questions about the different regions that they're in, like when can I plant my tomatoes, or when is a good time to harvest this or that. So tremendous resource in those sorts of things. But I'm hoping that the interest that has started will continue on, because is there anything any better than slicing your own tomato? And there's lots of community gardens too. Like there's some community gardens here. There's one in Ferry Road. There's one on the Ella Street property. And those are really taking off as well. And that's so nice to see. There's a food forest. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there's a food forest initiative that's been started in the grounds of the old Mount St. Joseph nursing home. So there's some folks out there doing some tremendous things and trying to produce things for themselves, but to also teach other people and to share that interest. And I think that's what gardening is all about. It's what makes it worth it. Yeah.
That's amazing, and I you don't think of all those things, right? When I think of gardening, I just
Right.
think of the beautiful artistry of those plants and the flowers, and but you don't think of food and that learning opportunity that that we all have to know where our food comes from, right? I just think I go and pick it up at the grocery store and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of folks like that. And I think with time crunches that everybody had before COVID, if nothing else, it's kind of taught us to take a step back and go back to some of the ways that we used to do before, or our parents did. At one time, there weren't very many properties without a nice vegetable garden in your backyard, and we're seeing, and I think that's terrific, terrific to see. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yes, when we
Talk to
went,
us a little. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Vero.
Well, it talk to us a little bit. So, like I said, I always just look at the artistry of gardening and the beautiful beds of flowers and shrubs and all that. But and it seems not haphazard, but it seems like if it were me, I'd just throw them all together in that little patch. But talk to me a little bit about planting and perennials versus all those kinds of that that planning stage that goes into gardening because it
Right.
I find it amazing that it takes all of that.
And it all comes together somehow. One of the biggest things I like to tell new gardeners is really look at what you like, really look at how much time you want to devote to your flower beds and to your gardens. If you want to have a lovely appeal but not have a whole lot of work, then be very choosy on the types of plants you put in. Also, when you're doing your planning, think about continuous bloom. Think about, okay, in the spring, what would I like to see? And plant your bulbs and all your spring blooming plants. And then next thing, your next layer should be all the things that are going to bloom in early summer, midsummer, and then into the fall. One nice flower bed that has actually done all that lovely work for you with just a little bit of planning of what you're going to put in there. Just do a section a year. Like, don't look at your yard and say, oh, I've got to do this over there and this. Take a section every year and build on that, so that after a few years, you, like after myself, we've been on this property for about 26 years. Well, we've built every corner as we went. We didn't try to do it in one year, one section. And that really helps. And now we just maintain it all down in the fall, the spring, everything is just lovely right now. And it's just well worth that effort. So just that planning of how you want to do that. And be really careful that you don't get invasive plants. If some gardener says to you, you really don't want that plant, you probably really don't want that plant.
So when you say invasive, you mean it'll
Yeah.
take over your garden, right? That's the
Yes.
one.
Now, that's the one. And what's interesting, when your first speaker was speaking about no mow May, for instance,
Yes.
there is a cultivated violet that a lot of gardeners, new gardeners, say, oh, I'd like to have that. And they come in light purple and dark purple and white. Well, this year, I don't know if you noticed it, but a lot of lawns were almost purple. And then they had the dandelions
Yes.
in there. That's an invasive plant. Well, you're going to have it forever. That's just it's the gift that keeps on giving. So you do need to be careful about those invasive plants. So that's where it's good if you're able to go to like a local plant sale, like the garden club would put on, and go and speak to the folks that are there. And they'll tell you. In fact, sometimes when we're planning, we'll ask our members, please don't bring any plants that would be invasive to folks that don't know how to handle them. So that would be a tip I would certainly say. Be real careful about things like that. Yeah. I think new gardeners are enthusiastic and they want to try everything, but a little bit of good solid advice would go a long way. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit of the basics on how to read? Now, I was out shopping this morning looking at plants, and I see things and I glance and I go according to what I see and what I like at the time. And I'm looking at the label, trying to
Ah,
read it and understand it, and I'm lost on all the
oh, I
information
love
that's
that
there.
question.
I don't know if I'm looking at perennials or
Yeah, that,
annuals, and I don't know the difference. And I'm like,
yeah,
it might
yeah.
as well be in
And
a different language.
that's a really good question. One of the things that we've noticed this year is that some of the garden centers aren't and the tags that are on the plants in the garden centers, they aren't putting what zone those plants are. So, like you say, Audrey,
Okay.
you gravitate towards these lovely plants with these bright flowers, but in the end,
Mm,
it may be there to be sold as a perennial, but it's not something for our zone. So you really have to learn to look at zones. I'm really used to looking at zones, and I wanted to buy a cherry tree this year. So I actually stood there with my phone and Googled the properties of those two different cherry trees and
okay.
made my choice based on it was a tree that was produced and grown in Canada. And I knew it was going to be a zone. I'm going to have that tree for many, many years instead of maybe a year or two. And all of a sudden you wonder, well, why did it fizzle out? So you really do need to put a little bit of research because plants are expensive as well. Like we're
Yes,
doing
they
an
are.
investment when we're doing our yards, and we'd
Yes.
like them to be around for a while. So that's something I would say when you're reading your labels. And if it doesn't have
Okay.
a zone, then you might want to walk away because you're just not
Okay.
sure that it's going to be suitable. Or you can be prepared to buy it as an annual and just say, okay, I'm going to love it for this year, but I may not have
Okay.
it next year. If it's a plant
No,
that's
no,
good
that's
for, if
yeah.
it's good for sun or if it's good for shade, what that plant will tolerate, because that will give you a bigger bang for your buck as well, too, to have it situated in a place where it should be.
That's, you know what, you've given us so much information today, Gwen, and we want to have you back in the fall when we're looking for those
Oh,
plants that we get ready for then. Quickly, how do we get a hold of the Miramichi Garden Club? And then we're out of time.
okay. Well, Miramichi Garden Club has a Facebook page just called Miramichi Garden Club. Ask to join, and if you have any specific questions, you can ask them there, or you can private message me as well. We would be very pleased if people wanted to come after they've seen this segment and see what it's all
Wonderful.
about.
Well, thank you so much, and we want to thank both of our guests for joining us today. And don't forget to have a great week, and we can't wait to see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.